Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the music rating, ranking, and reviewing podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown, which we rate, rank, and review any artist's discography, songs, musical topics, really whatever comes to mind. As you can notice now, I don't look like shit. I bought a new camera thanks to the man beside me and a new microphone. So now you can see my dumbass face and laugh at it in all your glory. With that being said, this is an episode in which you can laugh at me profusely because we're talking about UT's 2010s indie pop legend, Regina Spektor. Now, I would say in many ways, Regina Spektor feels like an artist I should like. I really like indie pop. I like those singer-songwriters. I have a thing for those late 90s kind of periphery of the little affair crowd, and she could very much be seen as like an ancestor of those. But just straight up, I don't like her very much. I have some positive things to say, but there is a very overlying theme throughout these albums and reviews that you will see, which is why I brought somebody who is presumably slightly more of a fan of Regina than I, right back from System of a Down to discuss the one and only Regina. Clay was going to be here, but he got annoyed, so no Clay. Sorry, guys.
That's unfortunate. It would have been fun to see what Clay had to say.
It would have. It's always fun to see what he has to say, though.
Absolutely. With Regina, it's more like I got into her through some main tracks. When I was taking vocal lessons, my teacher really loved her and her way of like her vocal techniques. And so she was someone who I've heard a lot of like different singles of, and the singles and the different songs that I've heard from her, I adore to a high extent. I think the quirkiness that she has to some of her lyrics and some of the ways that she tackles things, and especially with her background in like vocal jazz and a lot of different jazz influences, which is very evident on some of those first records. She just kind of uses that. She has really good idea of different orchestral techniques and orchestral different parts that she'll put into some of these tracks, and I feel like they go over pretty well. But she's some of the tracks that I like, some of my favorite tracks from her are like some of my favorite tracks like in like my top 100 songs.
Oh,
Absolutely. Oh my god, yeah. When we get to them,
I'm glad that you love her, and I'm
when we get to
really concerned that your vocal teacher was using her as one of the influences, but we shall see. That being said, I believe it's 8 studio records, and let's just kick right into this because we want to end on a good note. I'm going to start out. I'll say this much: this was far from the record I expected to be at the bottom. But upon a re-listen, man, I just don't like this album much at all. It's her most recent, Home Before and After. I don't know. I had this one at 3 stars beforehand, but I think going through the catalog and sort of getting a better overall context of her as an artist made me realize this album kind of sucks. It starts out okay. I think Becoming All Alone, it's a decent opener, probably one of her better vocal performances. Up the Mountain is awful. I could not stand that song. And I just don't like any other song across the record. One Man's Prayer annoys me, which is something that happens with her considerably. It's probably one of the worst examples of me just simply not liking her as a lyricist much at all. Loveology being the best example of that, in which I guess the bridge section at best is literally just her saying words that end in ology with a really... It's a decent piano part behind it, but she's done better. And it just perplexes me why anybody would love that song. And just more than anything, I just simply lack any connection to her at all. Most of the time, she comes across being very faux artistic. She's trying to go for this big sort of artsy message that's all quirky and all random. But at the end of the day, it just comes across being a bit of a scatterbrained mess for me, with this album being the worst example of that. I have it at 2 stars. I think it's a pretty lacking record overall, and it just sort of exemplifies most of the issues I have with Regina as an artist. However, probably the one thing that I will give Regina consistently is I think at her base level, without doing any of the awful inflections and weird accents that she does, I think Regina has a very pleasant, a very interesting vocal performance across most of her tracks. I just think that 90% of the time she takes it in the worst possible way for me. So I'm sorry, Regina fans. This is not going to be a fun one for you. Home Before and After, 2 stars, my number 8.
So for me, my number 8 is the one before the most recent one, the Remember Us to Life. I don't really have too much to say. It kind of feels like it just kind of came and went. I don't really remember many of the tracks from it. That's kind of the thing, and it was kind of when I was going through her discography, was just realizing by the end how much a lot of the tracks do just sound so much the same. They blend into each other. They sound very, just very similar to each other, to the point that it started to become a bit of a slog to listen to some of these albums, especially some of the later ones. By this one, I was definitely fatigued. So, Remember Us to Life, I had at about a 2.5 stars for me. Just really nothing came from it.
Ouch. That one's going to be a good bit higher on my list, mainly because I think it's one of the albums where she's the least trying too hard. It's one of her simpler records, and I can really appreciate that. This is where I get into some severe hot water, however. Number 7 is going to be Soviet Kitsch.
I fucking knew it.
Here's the thing. This is her most Regina Spektor-esque record, and I don't like Regina Spektor. So inherently, it's going to fall towards the bottom for me.
Yeah.
Just straight up, I don't connect with it at all. Of her first 3, despite the better production, I think that this one far and away has the least proper songs. And I don't know. I just find her songwriting to be a dramatic step down. On the first 2, she has more of a folky, kind of jazzy inflection to her. This is where she starts to experiment a bit with more electronica and her indie pop styles. And to be blunt, I don't think it works much at all. Her vocals just often annoy me, and I find her to be filled with clunky lyrics all throughout her tracks. I didn't write them down because there would be too many. With Poor Little Rich Boy and Carbon Monoxide being great examples to where I'm just really annoyed by her. Whisper is horrible, and I think Your Honor is even worse. The only song on here that I think is genuinely solid is the song Us, which, admittedly speaking, is somewhat beautiful. But 90% of this album just doesn't connect, and I find her general artistic approach to be incredibly disjointed and rather scatterbrained across it. I have it at a really low 2.5, borderline 2. I just don't get it. I don't see what people find so endearing and so kind of fun about this album, because she's just annoying to me. And it's like, you like what you like. It is what it is. It's just, it's not my thing. Number 7, Soviet Kitsch, 2.5 stars.
I think one of the big things that I kind of realized too is I love artists that have very unique and identifiable either singing styles or playing styles, something along those lines. And Regina 100% has like one of those very recognized, like I can pick out a Regina song if I hear it. Like I know from the lyrics, I know from the way that it's going to be constructed that it's probably going to be a Regina song. So that always kind of gives me an up on most artists, unless it's something that's just absolutely grating, like some artists can be. For me, for number 7, I had What We Saw from the Cheap Seats, their 2012 album. I loved the vocal drum parts that she did on, I think it was Marcello, but there was like the and it had like almost kind of like a little electronic sound that kind of gave it a sound of like almost the resonance of a tom, which was kind of cool. I thought it really fit the track. I thought it was, a good use of, little touches of like her vocal jazz influence in her past and that, and kind of combining it with what she's done with the electronica music and stuff. I also liked the song that was right after that, Don't Leave Me. There's a very nursery rhyme melody to it, but just felt really upbeat, had really nice little touches of trumpets throughout it as well. Other songs I really liked was the opener. Thought that was a really great track. But as it kind of went on, it did start to just kind of have that fatigue on, start to come on again, come on more. Don't really remember much of the back half of the album. Some of those songs, though, in the beginning half really were pretty good, but not too much memorable from the back half either on that one. So give that one probably about a strong 2.5, maybe a 3. Yeah.
So that's my number 6. And we have polar opposite reviews. For a while, I was fairly certain this was going to be my bottom. It ends up just being a little bit above that because I don't think that this album starts out very strong at all. For me, things don't get started until Don't Leave Me. And even then, I don't love that song. Really, the back half of this record is what gets me up to 3 stars for it because I think that there are some excellent songs there. I go as far as to say some of her best songs. I think How is a great song. All the Rowboats, I just re-listened. It might be my favorite Regina Spektor song.
That was my favorite of the back half tracks. All the Rowboats. I did love that track.
Yeah. And near the end, Jessica is a lovely closer, and The Party as well is a pretty good song. Despite that, I feel like Regina often tends to ruin her records with just really bad songs. Some, especially on songs like Open and Patron Saint. I don't know. I have this one at 3 stars. It's like, would I recommend anybody listen to it? Probably not. I don't know. I feel like there was a great record in here. Then she got a little bit into her too. Then she got a little bit too much into her head and was trying to like overly experiment. When at the end of the day, you're just like a really good piano-led singer-songwriter. You don't need this all weird experimentation. Just play your song straight, and your songs would be so much better most of the time. So yeah, number 6, What We Saw from the Cheap Streets, 3 stars.
For my number 6, I had Far, which was the 2009 album. This has some really good songs on it. I really love Genius Next Door. I love the story of that song. I feel like it's a really good track. Everything about it just flows really nicely. It feels like one of those just Regina tracks, like the epitome of what a Regina track really is. Again, I feel like she has really strong openings to her albums. The first 4 songs, Calculation, Eat, Blue Lips, and Folding Chair. Love that run of 4 songs right there, right at the beginning. Eat especially, just really beautiful instrumentation, really beautiful little piano piece on that. Around the middle is where it kind of loses me a little bit. Again, I really do love, I feel like Genius Next Door kind of at the end of the album really is something to wait for. But again, just a lot of the stuff just always kind of runs together throughout some of these as I was kind of getting into them. So this is another one that was kind of around a 3, maybe a 3.5 with some of those beginning tracks and just because of Genius Next Door.
Well, you've already talked about 2 of my favorite Regina Spektor records, so it is what it is, as if I. Anyways, next up for me is going to be her album Songs. This is a weird one. I think it has plenty of merit, and there are plenty of good moments on here. I think Regina sounds lovely, with this maybe being my favorite vocal record of hers, and her key work is excellent. The overall sound here is fair. You can clearly tell that it's very self-produced, but just something is missing. I don't think any of these are necessarily greatly written songs, except for maybe Samson. She utilizes a hip-hop cadence on the song Consequence of Sound, which aside from that, it's a decent track. Clarify, I don't hate hip-hop. Why is Regina Spektor doing it? It's like the worst possible artist you could have chosen to try that. And I feel like this album illustrates most of my issues with Regina as a whole. I think she's very talented. I just have issues with her musical approach, and I don't like her writing. She's always adding in these weird clips and sort of awkward lines that just throw me out of the songs. It's a shame because she is an artist that I really want to love and I think has a lot of merits to her, but just a difference in what I want from her music and what she wants to make and create is really just what sets it apart. I don't know. It's a decent record, but it just lacks the songs to push it ahead into good territory. I'm at 3 stars for songs. Number 5.
For me, my number 5 was her debut album, 1111. This one is really cool though, because it is definitely her most jazzy, has her most vocal jazz inflections and like influences there. Uh, I love the opening track, Love Affair, where it's just very minimalist. It's just piano and Regina, and just it's a very beautiful like that. Rejazz was another one that was a very nice jazzy track. I love the upright bass that's in that background. I did get a weird Billie Eilish, like sort of like, something where like Billy kind of doing it later on, of course, like proto Billy. I don't want to say that because I don't know, it gives it a weird, like they're somehow connected. But all I could think of was when I was listening to it, I was like, it sounds like something that Billy would do. And then I don't know that I love like the lyric, didn't need therapy to rehabilitate my smile. Don't know why, but that kind of got to me. Uh some of the middle kind of was getting a little bit of a slog, but I did really love Pavlov's Daughter. I thought that was a really cool song, really cool composition to it. That's the one I think that has the rapping on it. So of course, but I mean that's just the thing though. I mean I don't know. I don't really care if an artist goes out and experiments on something like that. It's not something she does all the time. So it was just kind of a little one-off little thing on a track. So I kind of liked it. I did also really like kind of like almost like slam poetry. It was at the end is really what I felt more from it, especially at the ending part. But that one I had at about a 3.5, as I really love a lot of the jazz influences on that one.
Okay, that's my number four. And while I didn't like doing this, I am at 3.5 stars. I can admit there are four good Regina Spektor albums. Would I say that I like them necessarily? No, but they are good. This is a solid debut that would show a lot of promise from the rest of her career that doesn't get met. Regina's keys are just excellent across this, and the same with her voice. The whole cast of characters working on this with her, they're just doing a great job. However, it showcases a problem that would plague all the future records. Regina just has a ton of ideas, but often fails to put them together in a real cohesive narrative. I know I keep banging on this drum, but it's how I feel about every record. This album is definitely the one with her most jazz influence. Yet you have a song like Pavlov's Daughter where she's rapping and it's awful. Once again, I don't hate hip hop. I hate Regina Spektor doing hip hop. This is probably one of her more grounded releases, though. I just think it's rather inconsistent song wise. Rejazz doesn't do a ton for me. The same goes for 29 Cent Blues. There are a couple of very good songs, though. My favorite of which being Back of a Truck, Buildings, and Braille. It's a good song. It's a good record. And just fails to wow me. I'm never like, this was really impressive. This was really cool. I'm just sort of met. I'm fine. I'm either kicked to the curb or I'm just met with moderate expectations, which maybe I'm expecting too much. Oh well. That's gonna be my number four, 11, 3.5 stars.
So I think it's funny. I think these two albums are more the story of where we fall with Regina Spektor, because my number four is Songs. And I feel like these two albums are very similar, but I feel like Songs is more where Regina's going more to her quirkiness, while 11 is more her staying in her like almost a more traditional style, and whatever traditional means to Regina. But Songs is the one I like because I feel like that's where you're seeing her kind of grow from just being another vocal jazz artist to being Regina Spektor, to being who she is, who she's made herself as an artist to be. Samson is 100% probably my favorite Regina song, although the version that comes in To Begin to Hope is definitely the better version. But this song is still absolutely perfect to me. I love everything about it. Oedipus, I love the vocal delivery that she has on that track. I will say it's unfortunate to mention it, but this does have the most legendary lyric of all time. And man, pickle jars are just pickle jars, and pickles are just pickles. Ingredients: water, salt, cucumbers, garlic, and pickling spices. The best best line that's ever been spoken in music. Brought me to tears. Bawled for about an hour after that song. Uh, love that Consequence of Sounds calls back to Pavlov's Daughter in the lyrics. I always thought that was kind of cool. Lacrimosa is another one that I thought was really cool. How she kept adding lines to the chorus, kind of unveiling the song as it kept going through. So really liked how that was all set up. And then Aching to Pupate was another song that I thought was extremely adorable. Another one that was just like the lyrics on it were very good, were very cute, very Regina. It's such a Regina song. But that one I do just like more because it is Regina being more who she is. So that one's about a 3.5 right there for me.
Nice. I'm glad because we're at the same score now, but you can clearly tell your level of enthusiasm is just far, far higher. And it's fun. Anyways, let's talk about Far, which is my number 3. It's another record with a ton of highs and lows. I do need to point out, though, that Jeff Lynne did some of the production across here. So yeah, it's inherently higher for me because I like Jeff Lynne a lot. And I do think that this is probably her best sounding record overall, despite there being a bunch of different producers as well. Despite that, per the usual, songs are pretty mixed. It starts out great with The Calculation, Eaten Blue Lips, all high in my list of Regina Spektor songs, but I really didn't like Folding Chair, and Wallet is also really bad. Especially on Wallet, she just feels very drowned out by the production and just sort of overwhelmed by the song itself. It's really weird. And even the later songs I liked, with Laughing With, Two Birds, and Human Next Door, simply don't match up to those initial trilogy of songs that I really enjoyed. And I don't know. There's obviously the vocal moments that I'm eyes into, the lyrical moments that turn me away. But I still think this is a good album. This is probably the first one I would recommend for somebody trying to get into Regina, because I feel like it gives off the most impression of everything that she does without ever necessarily overdoing it to the degree a record that I would have below this does. I don't know. I have it at 3.5. It's a good record, but it's like, I want to like it more because I feel like there's a lot of potential there. It's just the fundamental issues with the artist that knock it down. So number 3, Far.
So for me, number 3 is her most recent one, Home Before and After. Becoming All Alone might be, that is easily my most favorite of her most recent stuff since basically post 2010. Love it to death. Kind of gets me choked up a little bit every now and then. I love Up the Mountain. I love it. I love Up the Mountain. It's such an interesting song. It's such a Regina song. I love the little violin, the little parts that come in there. I love the little whispered parts. I don't know. That song to me, I really do. I like it. It's very much Regina to me. I also do love Loveology. I do see the part where you're talking about where with that bridge where it's cute, but it's also weirdly lazy at the same time. So, I mean, it's just, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, if you like the quirkiness that Regina has in her lyrics, you'll get it. You'll like it. If you don't, if you want her to kind of stay traditional, you're not going to like it. But yeah, I actually thought that was a really nice return to form for her. For me, I did really like that album. I've got it about 3.5 stars, around the same as the other ones there.
Nice. I also just put Up the Mountain back on. I got to the part where she's going, "Gotta get in there." And I fucking hate it. Like with a passion. I loathe it. Anyways. Number 2 is Remember Us to Life. This album really surprised me. I had actually heard this one before, and I thought it was all right, but I think it's pretty good now. I have it at 3.5 stars. This is her most straightforward release, mainly consisting of piano-led tracks, bordering on ballad-esque. It's just a very enjoyable listen. It's a very flat. She doesn't utilize any of her weird vocal inflections. It's a very straightly sung record. Almost too straight, as it grows kind of boring at points. So it's like, well, what do I want? Like if she experiments, if she does that, it's too far. If she strips it back, it's too little. I'm the problem, really, is what I've realized. And I don't know. I think it's a batch of pretty solid songs. That Bleeding Heart is a good opener, and I enjoy the two songs after it, Older and Taller, as well as Grand Hotel. Small Bell Sucks and Obsolete is pretty boring. But those middle tracks are all pretty solid, with Black and White and Tornado Land being my favorites. I don't know. I think it ends on a bit of a whimper though with the visit. But I don't know. This is the one record of hers that there isn't like a moment that I actively dislike. Like I can listen to it in full and I don't like hate it. So it's 3.5 stars. It's my number two. Remember Us to Life. Not a terrible record. Good job. Oh.
So for my number two, I've got Begin to Hope. I absolutely adore that album. It is absolutely fantastic. The opener, Fidelity, is really great. I love the plucky strings. I love the part, they're in that kind of the chorus where she's singing ha 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 ha. I love that little stuff. I love the song Better, where it's almost has a little bit of an indie rock feel to it. I do love when she gets a little sped up on her stuff. I do think it's really interesting. It's another thing where she kind of goes out of that normal zone of hers. I've already talked about Samson, but Samson is an absolute treasure of a song. Just a really good story of like unconditional love, whether you take it from the idea that it's talking about the story of the Bible where it's Samson when he gets his hair cut and loses his power and the person's still loving him for not having his power, or if you treat it from the way that a lot of people see it as a story of someone who's going through cancer and the person still loving the person going through cancer and seeing them lose their hair, seeing them lose their strength, having to do things for them. That song to me is that is when everything comes together and works perfectly to make Regina the quirky treasure that she can be. Because there are still quirky lyrics on there, mentions of like Wonder Bread and, weird things like that. But it's just, to me, that song is perfect. That's the quintessential Regina Spektor song that if someone's like, what do I listen to her by? That's what I'm telling you them to listen to. Après Moi was another great song I really loved. A song about revolution. I love the different, languages she's used in there. She has a little Russian poem that she actually cites in there. I love the 6/8 swing beat that's at the end. That Time is also a really good example of her storytelling and her way of like just making masterful lyrics. Lady also, I love the strong sax solo, had strong Tom Waits vibes almost from that track. Begin to Hope is definitely really one of my favorite ones because I do feel like that shows a little bit of her traditionalness mixed with her quirkiness, all kind of put together perfectly. Begin to Hope, I have that at a solid 4 stars.
Yep. And that's my number one, Begin to Hope. Which, by the way, you brought up the term unconditional love. Don't know if you've heard it. Sending you a song later with that title. Better than any Regina Spektor song. Anyways, sorry. For me, this is the best step forward that Regina could have taken. I feel like on this album, she's toned down a lot of her little vocal inflections and quirks that focus. And this one's focused more so on arrangements and the writing. Because of that, I think it's just a much cleaner and overall a more flowing record than something like Soviet Kitsch. I think that this is a great record from a purely sonic level. It's a gorgeous indie pop affair with her keys sounding better than they ever would. And the little electronic flushes touch into everything just brilliantly. Plus, the way her voice cuts through the mix is really nice. Fidelity is a great opener. I think this version of Samson is really good, elevating the arrangement and helping to breathe new life into the song. On the Radio is probably her best song. If I had to go, like, just going straight from lyrics, probably her best. I love Après Moi. Don't know how I say that. Just sort of copying you. And near the end, Edit and Summer in the City were pretty great. I don't know. There's still some things I didn't really care for here, notably Hotel's song. It kind of dragged a bit for me. But I don't know. Past that, there's a ton of really good material, and I don't have much to complain about. Up to 4 stars. I think that this is a very good album. Good job, Regina. Please go back to 2006 and make more records like this.
I can agree with that last statement. My number one Sophia Kitsch. Yep. It is to me. That's Regina at her most quirky, at her most still having those jazz, still having some of the best creativity almost to some of her stuff. Poor little rich boy. I don't know if you know, she was dating Julian Casablancas at the Strokes at the time, and that's who that song is about. Sort of a diss track towards him, and they're a little bit of a messy breakup going on around that time. It's fun if you listen to it again with that in mind, because Julian is, of course, kind of from that kind of background. The Flowers was a really good song too, a song about keeping like a dead relationship alive. I think the vocal melodies throughout the track are fantastic. I just think that has a lot of her great lines too. And then there's Us, which is the other quintessential Regina track, really orchestral, really great, like just vocal touches on there. The way she wraps those lyrics around, I love that song way too much. It's such a beautiful track. Sailor Song, I'm sure, is one of those songs that you probably hated. I knew it. I love it. I love that the idea of the joke. There's a kind of a joke in the song where the idea is she's saying Marianne's a bitch because Marianne is the ship and she's full of seamen. She's full of sailors. So that's the whole joke to that line. I like the little sea shantiness kind of feel to it. Yeah, it's great. I appreciate her trying to do something different with Your Honor and Kill Kanata, but that is definitely, without a doubt, my most hated song on that album. I can appreciate her trying to go that way, but it just, boy, that thing did not. It's like a rocket that just shot off, like, straight off into the side. Just okay. Oop. That went well. And then The Ghost of Corporate Future, I also thought was a really, really cute song. Really good. Chemo Limo as well. There's another one. Also, another one that touches on loving and cancer. So I'm sure she had something like that going on in her time, because she has a couple of songs that kind of almost touch on those themes. But yeah, for Soviet Kitsch, I have that at a good 4.5. I do love that album quite a bit.
Hey, I'm happy for you. I wish I thought it was listenable.
I think it's also interesting how earlier before the video, we were talking about how we both agree that she probably has about like an album of really good tracks. If you had to build a second album, it'd be a bit mixed. And then we were getting into albums 3 and 4, it'd be getting hard. I think that our album number 1 would look so different for both of us.
My album with number 1 would basically just be a mid-tier Fiona Apple record. So, which is basically how I view Regina Spektor. I didn't bring it up because I feel like it's easy, but just I feel like everything that she wanted to do, Fiona Apple just does way better. She's a better singer. She's a better writer. She's a better pianist. And I feel like they both have similar song structures, especially on a record like Extraordinary Machine. And I just like everything about Fiona better. So
it's fair.
Sorry, Regina fans. I was laying it on thick this time. I feel like you got off worse than the White Stripes people did.
I wish I was there for that one.
Oh,
I'd like to have combated that.
I'm glad I did that one alone, because I feel very strongly about that band.
That's the problem. You had to shut out all the other opinions because you knew they could seep through and they'd narrow away their in, and you'd like them all of a sudden.
Oh God, no!
You couldn't listen to the dissenting opinions.
I have listened to Elephant like 5 times, and it gets worse every time. But hey, this is another artist that I dislikes videos, so we can talk about that another time. That being said, any closing thoughts on Miss Spektor?
I will also say that I wish I liked a lot of her stuff more, because she is. I do the songs that I love from her. Again, they're some of my absolute favorite songs. I feel like when she is shining, she can really, really shine. But it feels like one of those things where it's just kind of like you got to put up with some of the other stuff to get those songs that, and then you can just take the songs that you like. I'm always kind of a playlist person anyway, so I'm more than happy to grab those songs I love.
Absolutely. I feel like she could make a really good EP. Like that. Maybe I should check it out and see if she has any banger EPs out there. Because I feel like that's the issue. I just feel like taking her in such large doses is the issue because I like her voice. She gets very grating over a full record for me, though. It's very quirky, very. I don't even know if twee is the term, but it's just very, I don't know, childlike to me. It's like kids suck, so I don't know. Now I'm just taking any excuse I can to nag on her. I do think that she is at her core a very interesting and well-versed musician. I wish she was interested in different things, is the best way for me to put it. That being said, though, there's plenty to love in here, even I can admit. If you're more open to what she does, she's probably like a top tier artist. That being said, though, sorry. I'm not gonna I only went below 2 once, so I don't know. That seems to be a theme with these artists that I don't really like. Where I don't ever go that low on my scores. It's just I stay very irritated the whole time, and that's what's fun about it. Despite that, I hope that you get more enjoyment out of Regina than I, and I hope that you were able to enjoy this discussion, whether or not there is an agreement or not. That being said, I hope that you all have a great one.